Hello everyone, this is Professor Любимцева in your GPY 100 Physical and Environmental Geography. This week we will have a conversation about soil systems. This is lecture 9 and it's based on our chapter 12. Whatever is the type of soils in a geographic area, they represent a very dynamic layer which consists of matter in all three states: solid, liquid, and gas. It includes both organic and mineral matter. Soils develop over a long period of time through a combination of processes acting together, both involving organic and non-organic material. The study of soil is called pedology, and a branch of physical geography which is interested in soils is called geography of soils. Factors that influence the formation of soils include all aspects of physical geography, such as climate, topography, parent material, vegetation, and time. The pedosphere, or sphere of soils, includes soil air, litter, organisms, rocks, materials, soil water, and represents the intersection of all other spheres such as the atmosphere, the biosphere, the lithosphere, and the hydrosphere. Soils of different geographic areas and different climates display various characteristics such as color, texture, moisture, structure, pH from acid to alkaline, presence of different minerals, and ability of soils to display horizons of different depth. Let's take a look at each of these characteristics. One of the very important characteristics of soils, allowing us to classify them in various types, is soil color. Soil color may be inherited from parent material, but in most cases it is also generated by soil forming processes. It also reflects climatic conditions where soils have developed. Black soils have abundant organic matter, while red or yellow soils are often created by iron oxides. Another important characteristic of soils is soil texture. Soil texture refers to the proportion of sand, silt, and clay present in the soils. For example, loams have almost equal proportion of sand, silt, and clay. Texture of soils is very important because it largely determines the ability of soil to retain water. So let's look at this graph showing us the changes in the size of particles of soils, ranging from gravel, which is the largest size of particle, through sand, silt, clay, and finally the finest particles that can be only seen in electronic microscopes, and they're called colloids. Depending on the ratio of sand, clay, and silt, you would find sandy loam soils, clay loam, loam, silty clay, and silt loam. For example, silt loam would be primarily formed by silt with a fairly small proportion of sand and clay. On the other hand, sandy loam would be 65 or more percent of sand with fairly insignificant amounts of loam and clay. Another very important characteristic is soil acidity or alkalinity. The neutral pH is 7, so this is the pH of pure water, and everything that has a value less than 7 is considered as acid, and everything with pH values greater than 7 is considered alkaline. So high soil acidity is typical for cold, humid climates. Here in Michigan, we have relatively acid soils. On the other hand, in arid climates, soils are primarily alkaline. That means that their pH is greater than 7. Another important characteristic of soils, allowing their diagnostics, is soil structure. Soil structure should not be confused with soil texture that we have just examined above. Soil grains are grouped into large masses called pads. In fact, if you hold a piece of soil in your hands and if you try to squish it, you would see that this piece would disintegrate in small particles, and they can be larger or smaller size, and they range in size from very small grains to large blocks. These blocks are called pads, and pads are bound together by soil colloids. The higher is the presence of colloids in soils, the more pads are bound together. Soil moisture is another important key factor in determining how the soils of a region can support vegetation and crops. And soil moisture is directly related to climate of an area, determining how much water is available, but it also depends on soil structure and texture, the ability of parent material to hold water. For example, silt, clay, and sand would have very different ability of retaining soil moisture. When precipitation infiltrates the soil, the water wets the soil layer in a process called soil water recharge. Now, depending on the texture and structure, water can percolate very quickly through the soils or can be held within for a long period of time, and that really determines how much water is available for the roots of vegetation. If the water storage level is so low that plants wilt, the wilting point has been reached in this type of soils. About 50% of soils consists of mineral and organic matter, much more mineral matter and less organic. The other 50% are somewhat equally distributed between water and air in ideal soils, where you would find about 25% water and 25% air. In dry climates, in dry soils, you would find significantly more air and much less water being available within soils. And the opposite, in too wet soils, you would find significantly more water and much less air supporting vegetation. Another important characteristic of soils are minerals. Minerals are associated with underlying parental materials. There are both primary and secondary minerals that can be found in soils. Primary minerals are compounds that are present in unaltered rocks underneath the soils. Those are silicates and silicates with varying proportions of aluminum, calcium, sodium, iron, and magnesium. Secondary minerals are those primary minerals that have been chemically altered in soils by various chemical processes, such as leaching, for example. Clays are the most important group of secondary minerals. Soils form distinctive soil horizons. Soil horizons are distinctive horizontal layers that differ in physical composition, chemical composition, and organic content or structure of soils. And based on the presence of those soil horizons, we can classify soils in different groups. Soil horizons are developed by the interaction through time of climate, living organisms, and configuration of the land surface. There are four main soil horizons, such as A, E, B, and C, but not all of them are present in all types of soils. So let's examine different groups of soils and look at some of those typical soil horizons. This ideal hypothetical soil profile shows us all four major horizons, such as organic horizons, O and A, and inorganic or mineral horizons, such as E and B, as well as parent material, horizon C. And then the unaltered bedrock underneath would be considered sometimes horizon D. So organic horizon is entirely made of the remnants of vegetation on tops of soils. It includes lots of roots, it includes lots of microfauna, and then horizon A is the result of a mix of the material from the horizon O and the horizon E, and it can, depending on the types of soils, it can have very different depth and different amount of humus or organic matter. Horizon E is the elevation horizon, and elevation means essentially the leaching or removal of some of the minerals from this horizon. And then horizon B is a horizon of elevation, and this is where some of the material from the horizons A and E is redeposited as it moves with water and forced by gravity all the way towards horizon C. Soil horizons are formed through soil forming processes, such as soil enrichment, which adds material to the soil body, removal, which includes leaching, Translocation, which includes the processes of elevation and elevation, essentially removing and adding material from one horizon into the other. And transformation, which is the conversion of primary minerals into secondary minerals. In the next few slides, we are going to take a look at the major soil orders present in North America. We are going to start with jelly soils. Jelly soils are the soils of Arctic and subarctic regions. Those are soils with permafrost. Permafrost are permanently frozen soils. So underneath of the live layer of the soils, you would always find some permanently frozen ground. As you can see in the United States, these soils are found primarily in Alaska. The next prominent order of soils are the so-called histosoils. These soils are composed mainly of organic material. Those are soils of wetlands, and those are also soils of ancient riverbeds. We can find lots of histosoils here around campus. As you can see, our histosoils are characterized by very well-developed organic horizon O, but they almost don't have horizons E and B. So we have lots of soils of this type here in Michigan. The next soil order, which is also very prominent in Michigan, in northern part of Michigan, are the so-called spodosoils. Spodosoils are acid soils characterized by a subsurface accumulation of humus and a high presence of aluminum and iron oxides. As you can see, spodosoils have very well-developed horizon E, and they have somewhat well-developed horizon B as well, sometimes multiple layers of E and B horizons. So this very light color horizon E is the major characteristic of spodosoils. Spodosoils are usually developed under coniferous vegetation. That's why you can find them in Wisconsin, in northern Michigan, particularly in the Upper Peninsula, as well as in New England. The next soil order are angisoils. Angisoils develop only in the areas that are affected by volcanic eruptions. In fact, they're called this way they're named from the Andes Mountains, where they were described for the first time. And those are soils that have formed in volcanic ash. So here in the United States, we can find them in the Rocky Mountains, in Cascades, in the areas where you can find volcanic ash. The next soil order are the so-called oxysoils. Oxysoils are very highly weathered soils that are found primarily in the intertropical regions of the world. So you can find them in Hawaii, you can also find them in the Caribbean region. They're characterized by this very prominent orange or red or sometimes pink colors, and the presence of these colors is the sign of very high presence of aluminum and iron oxides that give them this very distinctive color. The next soil order are the so-called vertisoils or vertisols. Vertisols are clay-rich soils. They can very much change their appearance depending on how much water is available. They can look as very swollen and full of water immediately after the rain, and they can also look more like kind of cracked clay surface when they shrink, when there's not enough of moisture. As you can see, these soils have very prominent horizon B, and they almost don't have, or they don't have horizon E at all. As the name suggests, the aridisoils are the soils that are developing in arid environments. Aridisoils are soils containing very high amount of calcium, and they develop in dry lands. They exhibit at least some subsurface horizon development. Usually they don't have horizon E, simply because there is not enough of water for elevation process, and there is lots of accumulation of calcium, sometimes in more than one horizon B. Altisols are mainly developed in eastern and southeastern part of the United States. They're strongly leached. They're developed in areas with high amounts of precipitation. Those are acid-forest soils that developed primarily under broadleaf vegetation. and they have relatively low native fertility. Another very interesting soil order are the so-called mollisols. Mollisols are the soils of grassland ecosystems. They have developed in the areas that once used to be occupied by prairies that today are almost entirely extinct and occupied by agricultural lands. This is because these soils are very, very fertile. They are characterized by a very thick and dark surface horizon. As you can see, the horizon A can sometimes extend for at least quarter meter, and then underneath there is a well-developed horizon B, often with high amounts of calcium, which also supports agricultural crops or original prairie vegetation extremely well. Alphisols are also soils of forests, and we can find them in many parts of the lower peninsula in Michigan and in many other parts of Midwest. Those are moderately leached forest soils that have relatively high native fertility. So as you can see, those are well-developed soils with elevation and then elevation horizons with some accumulation of calcium down the profile of those soils. They're quite well developed with distinctive horizons, and they're fairly deep, mainly supporting hardwood and mixed forests. And inceptisols are soils that exhibit very minimal horizon development. As you can see, those are very young soils, have a little bit of horizon A and somewhat very undistinctively developing horizon B. Those are usually very shallow soils. Antisols are somewhat similar to inceptisols, but they're even less well developed. Those are very recent origin soils with almost no distinctive soil horizons at all, and usually you can only find somewhat developed horizon A that is marked by roots of the vegetation, and then there are almost no other horizons, as horizon A just progressed to unconsolidated parent material. So as I said, those are usually very recent soils, and they can be found in different parts of the country, in different parts of North America, in the areas where soil development has been very recent.